With Jessica's death, it became certain that the culprit was hiding somewhere nearby, and that they'd come for our lives if they had a chance. According to Genji, when tomorrow morning comes, the boat should arrive. But the boat had a radio. We'd probably be able to contact the police directly with that. All of us gathered in the parlour and decided to wait quietly until tomorrow. I proposed that we would search throughout the mansion for clues about the culprit, but Aunt Rose rejected that, saying that if we managed to corner the culprit, or maybe provoke them, it might lead to a third murder. That was probably the right thing to do. If a bunch of amateurs like us investigated, there's no way we'd find anything. It would be wise to focus on protecting ourselves without doing anything unnecessary and leave it to the police starting tomorrow. We'd been tense at the beginning, but other than Aunt Rosa, most of us had spent all the morning watching TV and getting bored, so our sense of danger had faded away considerably. When we thought about it, yes, 6 adults certainly had been killed together in the first murder, but that made it seem like some backhanded method like poison had been used. And for the second murder, we figured those two became sacrificed because they'd unfortunately isolated from the rest of us. From this, it was possible to imagine that the culprit wasn't a large number of adults, and they wouldn't be capable of killing this large group gathered in the parlour all at once. Right now in this parlour there's George and me, Maria, Aunt Rosa, Genji, Goda, Shannon, Kumasawa, and then Dr. Nanjo, for a total of 9 people. Furthermore, Aunt Rosa was even armed with a gun. Surely, with this many people staying in this room, they wouldn't be able to touch us easily. That feeling of security, along with the passage of time, allowed us to recover from the shock of that morning bit by bit. By the way, lunchtime had just ended for us. However, it had been a canned food lunch, a far cry from dinner last night that Goda had skillfully made for us. Aunt Rose also suspected that poison may have been used in the first murder, though we probably couldn't deny the possibility that the culprit had snuck into the kitchen during all that confusion in the morning and mixed poison in with the ingredients there. Aunt Rosa gave orders to us all, saying that until the police came, we must put anything into our mouths except safe things like canned food. As a cook, Goda must have felt very let down. Apparently eager to display his skill anyway, he said that he at least wanted to grab some plates arranged with canned food on them. At first Aunt Rosa had been reluctant, examining each of the plates that were bought, but she hadn't been able to find anything to complain about them. And Goda's chef-picked canned food lunch combo was born. Goda said something about taste being savoured not just with the tongue but with the eyes as well. I see, it's the same canned food we ate for breakfast, but it feels something completely different.
バトラ、見て見て。これが狼と羊のパズル。
As I was sitting lazily on the sofa, with no desire to watch TV, Maria came over and pulled a picture book out of her handbag and held it out to me.
あ、なんだよ、その本は。狼と羊のパズル？どれどれ？
Wolves and sheep puzzle. It was a phrase Aunt Rosa said this morning when we'd gone to call Jessica. At the time I hadn't known what it meant, and right after there was an uproar with Jessica's corpse being found, so I'd forgotten about it completely. The book that Maria held out to me looked like a foreign picture book or something that had been translated. When I opened it, I realized it was a book stuffed with riddles.
何匹かの狼と羊よね。1台のボートを使って対岸まで連れてくパズルなの。
ああ、そんなルールのゲームを聞いたことあるな。これはそれの狼と羊バージョンなのか。
It was a very simple puzzle passed on from long ago. Let's try posing a question. On the right bank, there's 2 wolves and 2 sheep. There's a boat that as many as 2 animals can ride on, and using it, you have to move all 4 of them to the opposite left bank. That's the puzzle. There are 2 rules. The first regarding the boat. Every single wolf or every single sheep can paddle it, but it can only hold 2 animals. The second rule regarding the wolves. When they're in greater number than the sheep at any location, they attack the sheep and it's game over. For example, at the start of the game, let's say 2 sheep will get on the boat to the other side. Then one of the sheep gets off and the other one goes back to the first bank. When it does, there's 2 wolves in the first bank and a single sheep that returns there. What happens, number of wolves greater, blah blah blah. Yeah, I know. By the way, the right answer is to move both wolves to the opposite bank of the first turn. Then 1 wolf comes back. The second turn you move 2 sheep to the opposite bank. Then 1 wolf comes back, and the third one you put that last wolf on the right bank. Partway through, there may be the same number of wolves and sheep on both sides, but that isn't a problem. You only lose when the number of wolves is greater. But this book uses wolves and sheep as an example, but lots of people probably know this game using different characters. Looks like Mario wanted to test whether I too could solve a puzzle she knew how to solve, and she kept showing me different pages saying solve this one and this one's hard. So what was happening with an Aunt Rosa mentioned this puzzle? That's right, when we decided to go and get Jessica, we talked about how many men should go. And Aunt Rosa mentioned the wolves and sheep puzzle saying we should all go together. That could only mean one thing. Aunt Rosa was saying there was a wolf among us. So she was thinking that would be safer if the number of wolves and sheep was in balance, but other wolves could bear their fangs if the situation changed. At the time we found our parents' corpses, Aunt Rosa already suspected that the servants might be wolves. She sniffed out the possibility that, while she didn't know whether it was all of them or some of them, there were wolves hiding among them. There's no surprise, the murder scene was very elaborate. It's easy to imagine there were multiple culprits. And because she'd reached that conclusion when we went to Jessica's room and learned that Jessica had been killed after being alone with the servant Canon, it wasn't hard to imagine why Aunt Rose suspected the servant so persistently.
はいはい、ただいま。
それではジョージさん、一度失礼いたします。
うん、気をつけて。あ、ローザおばさん、僕も一緒に行っていいかな。
ごめんなさい。ジョージ君は残ってくれるかしら。ちょっとお話ししたいことがあるの。
そうですか。シャノン、ごめん。とにかく気をつけて。一人にならないでね。
はい。
南條先生、ちょっとご相談が。
はい、何ですかな。
The servants pulled the dishes and empty cans on the serving cart and started to head out into the corridor. Behind them, Aunt Rosa was talking to Dr. Nancho about something in a small voice.
わかりました。参りましょう。
ええ、よろしくお願いしますね。
Dr. Nanjo closed the book he was reading, rose from the sofa and followed after the servants. Aunt Rosa stuck her head out in the hallway after seeing they were completely out of sight. She closed the door and spoke.
みんな聞いて。これで今ここにいるのは後宮の人間だけね。
ん？確かにそうなりますね。
Didn't Battler get disowned?
狼を全部追い出したってことっすか、ローザおばさん。
With that one sentence, Aunt Rosa's gaze grew sharp. Apparently she had picked up on the sarcasm. She laughed lightly.
バトラ君は頭の回転が速いのね。賢い子は好きよ。話が早いわ。
おお、バトラー頭いい？これ解ける？ 64ページの難しいの。
マリアは少しの間テレビを見ていなさい。ママはバトラ君たちとお話があるの。
おお。
ローザおばさん、パズルの話はバトラ君に聞いたよ。用心深いのは悪いことじゃないと思うけど、さすがに疑り深すぎるのもどうかと思うよ。
真の犯人がベアトリーチェかどうかは別にして、少なくとも使用人たちがその一味であることを疑うことはできると思うの。兄さんたちが殺されていた最初の殺人、とても残酷な仕打ちがされていたわよね。
If we take the... Who's that in the back? I don't remember who that one is. That's Canon, right? So, Genji, Rosa, Shannon, Goda, Canon. If we take it very literally, and this is a wolf and sheep problem, then that means at all points in time we must assume that the sheep either outnumber or equal the wolves. This includes this situation here. Despite that's stupid because this is they're showing off how they kill people, so yeah. Which means at most of this group only 2 of them are wolves. And we can that means I need like a graph to show this off, but yeah.
あれが一人でできる真似に見える。
謎の来客、ベアトリーチェ様が夜鍋をして、チクチクやったのかもしれねえぜ。
Wait, so let's say in this assumption, but it has to be canon. One has to be canon because, you know, a canon and someone else would have to be assumed to be loaded with Jessica, but canon's not the killer. Which means, I guess 2 people were alone? No, whatever. Now let's say it's Genji and Shannon, which means we can assume that Kinzo is dead. Out of the people who just left, that was like, what, 5 people? And Genji and Shannon are still part of that crew. The fact that George switching sides doesn't really matter. It would only make the side of Yushio Myers a bit weaker if they lost a member because they're already even. If George is a wolf or not, him switching sides doesn't really change the outcome.
ジェシカちゃんの部屋の扉をめぐるマスターキーの件は使用人の誰かが関わっている証拠じゃない。
I'm still assuming Rose is the killer. Only the master key could have locked the door to Jessica's room. Who's to say that it wasn't stolen like the letter? So we can only assume that one of the servants... Can we? No. Wait.
チェス盤をひっくり返すぜ。おかしいよ、ローザおばさん。なんで犯人はジェシカを殺した後、わざわざ施錠したんだ？施錠すれば、マスターキーの持ち主が疑われるのは必然。わざわざ施錠する必要がないぜ。
そうだよ。バトラ君の言う通りだ。わざわざ疑われるようなことをする理由がない。
うん。それは面白い考えよね。もちろん、私もそれは考えた。だとしたら、施錠した人物は使用人を疑わせたくて、マスターキーなしであの扉を閉めた。でもそれは不可能。でしょ？
That's right. If there existed some trick that could lock the door without a master key, that would make this great disguise for casting doubt on the servants. If the culprit's goal was for us to isolate ourselves from the group so they could attack us one by one, this trick would also be effective at giving rise to the paranoia. But there was no way to lock that door without using a master key. On one moment. Okay, so the last round, 1, 2, 3. Canon killed with head. No, who was Kinzo was head, Canon was chest, and then 3 people died all at once. Our 2 groups, I'm gonna discount Beatrice killing Maria because she has her favour or whatever. So either A, all 5 of the people sent out are going to die, and there'll just be us 4 left. And Kinzo, who's apparently alive, maybe? and also Beatrice, and or two other people are going to die, like Kinzo and Beatrice, and then everyone in this room apart from Mario will be killed and all the servants will be left alive.
マスターキーを使わずに閉める方法がないなんてどうして言い切れるの？
Magic. Next question.
ルドルフ兄さんの言っていた悪魔の証明になるんじゃない？私たちには想像もつかない方法で閉められたのかもしれない。私たちに思いつかないからといって未知のトリックがあることを否定することにはならない。
Didn't Beatrice say that it could only be locked with the keys?
そりゃそうだけどよ。つまりあれか？疑わしきは黒ってわけなのか？
具体的なトリックはわからないけれど、それでも外角はわかるの。申し訳ないけど、カノン君を犯人だと仮定すると非常に簡単に説明できる。死体がない理由までね。
だってカノン君はマスターキーを持ってなかったんですよ。他の使用人ならともかくカノン君にだけは施錠はできなかったはず。
なるほど。それでローザおばさんはジェシカの部屋に入って早々に俺たちにクローゼットなんかを探せと言い出したわけか。ローザおばさんこそ普段の様子から想像できるより頭の回転が速いな。
妹の頭の回転速度は常に姉マイナス1よ。今は誰にも気を使う必要がないからせいせいするわ。
George realised he was referring to her Aunt Eva, and seemed to be a little uncertain how he should take that sarcasm.
ごめん。僕にも分かるように説明してほしいな。カノン君のマスターキーはジェシカちゃんのポケットに入って密室に閉じ込められていた。施錠した後に部屋の外からポケットに入れるなんて芸当は不可能なはず。
違うんだよ兄貴。ローザおばさんの想像しているやり方ならこのトリックはカノン君にしか使えない。
Are they gonna say something stupid like Jessica killed herself?
そしてジェシカのポケットにマスターキーを入れたまま鍵なしで施錠することができる。そしてその結果として死体もなくなることになる。
Plus the door could be locked without using a key while the master key was in Jessica's pocket. Must often caught feeling.
どうやって鍵なしでどうやって施錠するんだい？
簡単よ。ジョージ君だって帰宅したら施錠するでしょ。つまみをひねってカチリとね。
Is this my latch theory? From the first murder, the stupid latch theory. Oh my god.
まさか。いやでもカノン君の姿はどこにも。
兄貴にもピンときたみてえだな。ローザおばさんが室内を探したのはそういうことだ。内側から鍵を閉めジェシカのポケットに鍵を突っ込んだカノン君がどこかに隠れて俺たちをやり過ごそうとしているのを探したんだ。
Wait, so I think Canon was behind the door. It was the simplest. I'm just gonna let them explain it because this is currently so stupid in my mind. I need them to clear up this. It was the simplest kind of closed room trick. It meant him hiding inside the closed room after the murder was committed, and then all he had to do was go out after those who discovered the body left, and the closed room murder would work perfectly.
私たちはあの部屋を探したけれど何も見つけられなかった。でもだからといってあの部屋に使用人たちしか知らない秘密の隠し通路のようなものがないとは言えない。
But we know it doesn't have one.
それがどこに隠されていたかはわからないけれど、その隠し通路を仮定し推理することで彼しかありえないと断言できるのよ。
その推理はよ、俺も一番最初に考えた一番嫌な推理だから、一番最初にその可能性を潰したかった。
カノンはこの部屋で殺された。であろう。そなたはカノンが犯人であると疑いそうになったため、真っ先にその可能性を潰すために。これ、わかっておるわかっておる。
だから、その次に考えたのはこうだった。あの部屋にいたのは実は3人だったという説だ。ジェシカとカノン君は被害者。そして、犯人である来客ベアトリーチェも一緒にいた。という考えだ。
そなたは、人間であるわらわが、魔法を使わずに犯行を行ったことにしたいのだったな。なるほど。そなたにぴったりの陳説であるぞ。
お前は2人を殺し、内側から施錠した。そして、カノン君の死体を担いで、普通の人は気づかない秘密の方法。つまり、隠し扉を使って部屋から脱出したんだと読んだ。しかし、お前に赤で言われちまった。あの部屋に隠し扉の類はないってな。
うん。お前たちの知らない秘密の通路は存在せぬぞ。ノックスだったかバンダインだったか。何でもミステリーには秘密の通路があってはいけないらしい。そのお作法にわらわも従ったということよ。つまり名探偵は部屋を調べ尽くさずして隠し通路がないと断言できるわけだ。人間の推理ごっことはなんとお気楽なものよの。
くそ。でけえこと言いやがるぜ。ありがとよ。魔女様のお取り計らいのおかげで、俺も部屋を探し尽くさずに、あの部屋に隠し扉がないと断言できるぜ。
うん。この部屋に隠し扉はない。扉と窓以外に出入りする方法はない。
ってことはよ。今、ローザおばさんがぶってる自信満々の仮説は、間違ってるってわけだ。しかも悔しいことに、この仮説は反証不能だ。魔女のお前は赤で、隠し扉はないと断言すれば、それで決着する。しかし人間の俺は、ローザおばさんにそれを反論しても、受け入れられないだろう。隠し扉がないことを人間は証明できない。悪魔の証明になっちまう。くそ。魔女ってのは便利だな。
そんな、あるかないかもわからない隠し扉を理由に、カノン君を犯人呼ばわりするなんて、僕は納得できないな。
納得できないなら、より納得できる推理を聞かせて。ないのよ。私はずっと考えてる。これしかないのよ。ジョージ君はシャノンちゃんと仲が良かったわね。だから使用人全員が犯人であることは受け入れがたいと思うの。私もシャノンちゃんが犯人の一味であるなんて信じたくない。でも全員であるか否かはともかく、確実にあの中に犯人もしくは共犯がいるのよ。それだけは見誤っちゃダメ。
カノン君以外にも狼がいると見てたんだな。ジェシカの部屋で犯人はカノン君だと大騒ぎしたのは使用人たちの反応を見るためだったっていうのか。
ええ、そうよ。そしてその結果、私は一層の疑いを持つに至ったわ。確実に使用人の中に狼がいる。確実にね。そして狼と羊のパズルのように普段はおとなしくしているけれど、チャンスがあったら襲ってくるに違いないの。ジェシカちゃんは一人で船に乗った羊よ。あのパズルでは頭数の時は襲ってこないけど、私たちのパズルは違う。チャンスと人数次第なら頭数でも襲ってくる。ジェシカちゃんが殺されたように。
僕は怒りたいことがある。じゃあ厨房へ行かされてるシャノンは危険な状態じゃないか。今すぐ僕たちも厨房へ行くべきだ。誰が狼だろうと狼でなかろうと、僕たち全員が揃っていれば均衡するならそれを保ち続けるべきだと思う。
シャノンちゃんはお父様のところへ源氏さんと一緒に行った。その時に孤立したはずなのに殺されなかった。源氏さんも狼ではないから？違うわ。二人とも狼だったからよ。
Okay, then how do you explain the fact that Kinzo's alive in quotation marks and you saw him? I think.
シャノンは悪事の片棒を担ぐような人じゃない。いくらローザおばさんでもそれは聞き流せません。今の発言に対し僕は取り消しを要求します。
兄貴の前で悪いが、その論法エヴァおばさんの雰囲気にそっくりだな。こっちが反論できなきゃ自動的に自分が正しいみたいな。
Guilty until proven innocent.
やっぱり血は争えないな、おばさん。
私だって今の自分はあまり褒められたものじゃないとは思ってる。でもね、私は母なの。マリアの無事を守るためなら鬼にもなるわ。本当ならマリアと二人きりでどこかに閉じこもっていたいくらいよ。でも私は同時にあなたたちの母でもあるつもりなの。今やあなたたちは私の子供も同然。私は自分の子じゃないからといってあなたたちを見捨てたりしない。
Wait, wait, wait. Okay, so let's assume that we're going to take the wolf thing very literally, and we're going to say that Canon and Jessica were both innocent. This means that we need 3 wolves in order to take out Canon and Jessica. And now we could just say Kumasawa and Goda were available. That's only 2. And also Rosa, because I'm not letting up the fact that she's clearly suspicious. So we could just say it's these 3. And also maybe Rudolph? I'm not letting up the fact that I think it's Rudolph. Yeah, okay.
絶対。
そりゃどうも。
私はあなたたちの母として油断しないでと警告したかっただけなの。常に私の目の届くところにいて私があなたたちを守ってあげる。
ついでに俺たちが狼でないことも監視してくれるってわけだ。そりゃありがたいぜ。そういうおばさんは自分が狼ではないって証明はできるのかよ。
ええ、できるわ。
即答っすね。どうやって？
これよ。これが証拠よ。
Aunt Rosa lifted her gun and pointed the barrel at me. But it was only for an instant. She immediately lowered the gun, laughing impishly. But to me, the time I spent staring down the barrel of the gun felt like eternity.
その銃がどうローザおばさんが犯人でないことを証明するというんですか？
考えてもみて。私が犯人だったらどう？使用人たちが出ていったこの千載一遇の機会を逃すと思う？あなたたちをズドンと撃って、あとは適当な言い訳をするだけよ。窓の外にベアトリーチェが現れて銃を撃ってきたとかね。
But people would know that gun itself was fired because it's not hard. And, like, people aren't as stupid as you, Rosa.
私は2発を撃ち返したと称して、2発分の空薬莢を床に捨てればいい。
Okay.
そりゃすげえ乱暴な理論だが、確かに一理あるぜ。
クラウス兄さんが昔よく言ってたわ。力こそ正義ってね。これがまさにそうなのかしら。
But maybe people would know that they were shot with a gun, because bullet wounds, and there was only 2 gunshots, so how would...
ごめんなさいね、二人とも。私も今朝からの事件続きでかなり冷静さを失ってる。普段の私を知る二人から見れば、今の私は余裕がなくて少し短気そうに見えるかもしれない。でも分かってる。私は悪意ある犯人からあなたたちを守りたい。そのためには鬼になる。それだけのことなの。怒らせるようなことを言ってごめんなさいね、バトラ君、ジョージ君。
And not to say Mario wouldn't spill the beans.
仲直りしましょう。
Mario's a wild card, you never know what she's gonna do. And like, she likes Beatrice, so she'd be like, no, Beatrice didn't show up, because Beatrice wouldn't do something this stupid. An unsatisfied expression rose to George's face. He probably couldn't forgive the damage done to Shannon's honour. What about me? Several bits of circumstantial evidence hinted at the servant's participation. I didn't want to believe one of them was a culprit or possibly colluding with the culprit, but in our current situation it was little more than wishful thinking. Whom should I believe? In the first place, who is the culprit? Are there accomplices? And if so, how many? It seems I've only been suspecting the people we know. I quickly forgot that the 19th person, the guest Beatrice, who arrived yesterday and boldly claimed to be the Golden Witch. In fact, I still haven't seen her face. I heard she greatly resembles the witch in the portrait. But since I haven't seen her directly, no matter how hard I try, it doesn't really feel to me as the 19th person is on the island. No, I've subconsciously hallucinated the culprit's one of the 18. Damn it. Come out, Beatrice. If you're the bad guy, then act like the bad guy and show yourself, laughing in a high-pitched voice and mocking us. Just like a bad guy in one of those dramas who, even when they're exposed to the culprit, aggressively say, where's your... what is this, an Ace Attorney game?
証拠は終わりかの？
うっせえ。てめえはしばらく黙ったろ。
There were 5 humans in the kitchen, but it was very quiet, filled with only the sound of rain. It was only accented by the sound of Shannon and Kumasawa washing the dishes. Gerda was using the leftovers from breakfast and lunch as ingredients for soup. Those were to speculate that poison might have been out of the food, so they decided to eat canned goods, but it hadn't seemed being too satisfying. But Gerda thought she was being too cautious, so he spontaneously creating a soup to be served only to those who wanted some. Shannon and Kumasawa were washing the dishes that the food had been arranged on. On the inside, they may have thought Gerda should wash them, since he's the one who wanted the food arranged on plates in the first place, but they left their complaints unsaid for the time being. Genji and Nanjo were facing each other across a crude chess set, but hardly had many years of experience. The game was still only just begun. Because of the opening game, although the experienced players had been honed to perfection, it looked like a ceremony where they just moved the specific pieces in specified order.
良い匂いですね。やはり缶詰ではこうはいきませんね。
開封した食材だけで作りましたので、毒が混入しているなんてことはありませんよ。皆さんの分もお作りしていますので、ぜひ食べましょう。もちろん私もお毒にしますよ。安心して召し上がってください。
本当にいい匂いですね。合田さんのまかない料理は本当に美味しいです。
美味しい材料を買ってきて、美味しい料理が作れるのは当たり前です。私は師匠に あり合わせのもので美味しく作るまかない料理を極めてこそ真の料理人だと習いました。
それはいい師匠でしたな。おかげで私はとても美味しいスープをごちそうになれそうです。
親族の皆様にお召し上がりいただくための材料で作ることになってしまったのが残念です
ローザさんも朝からのいろいろでお疲れなのでしょう。無理もないことです。
でもそのおかげで美味しい食材のスープが飲めるのですからね。
Birds had apparently warned everyone but they didn't understand the danger of it were in, and really must assume that poison was mixed in with the food. The mood of the time had led them to disagree, but hunger wasn't something that could be swayed by a momentary emotion like that.
皮肉にも普段の私たちではとても味わえないスープとなりました。できるなら客間の皆さんにもぜひ振る舞いたいところなのですが。
ローザ様のご指示に背いている以上よした方がいいだろう。飲みたいものだけ飲むといい。
ほほほほほ。見えないところで上手に息抜きするのも使用人の心得でございますものね。
When Kumasawa cackled, Shannon and Goda laughed too. It seemed in the space there were only their fellow servants were gathered, they could relax quite a bit. Shannon didn't like Goda's occasional dishonesty, but she knew there was no falsehood in his childish smile when he cooked, nor his desire for people to enjoy his food. Even though it was a little aggravating to be made to wash the dishes, she couldn't really hate him. However, they couldn't have dreamed the fact that Rosa was calling them wolves in the parlour at exactly the same moment they were spending their time peacefully like this. At the time, several of the servants heard a sound of something being dragged and then a thump. It seemed like the sound made by a servant outside the back door when they were carrying a mountain of trash bags on a rainy day. Maybe a servant was returning from work wearing a raincoat. Though at first that sound didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary to any of them. But they soon realized, right now everyone was either in the kitchen or the parlour, so who could possibly be at the back door? As the servants looked at each other, they checked to make sure each of them knew what the sound meant.
誰でございます？
The servants knew the mansion's layout well, so they understood how incomprehensible it would be for someone from the parlour to actually go outside in this typhoon. Go all the way around and come back to this back door. Was it Kinzo? They couldn't imagine that Kinzo, who never left his study, would dash out in the middle of this typhoon and come back to the back of the house, where only low-class people ever entered or exited.
気のせいじゃないですよね。
Shannon and Kumasawa drew close to each other, fearfully looking at the back door.
どちら様ですか?
Gerda fearfully approached the back door as he called out, as his eyes flashed towards the butcher's knife that sat on the nearby sink. He didn't pick it up yet, because there was still a possibility that this was a member of the family. However, that possibility was impossible. There was no response from across the door to Gerda's initial question. Maybe his voice had been so quiet that it hadn't reached through all the wind and rain outside.
源氏さん。
南條先生と女たちは下がってる。
一体どなたなんですかな?
Genji took a knife with a classical design from a stationary box placed near the chest set. It was something to be used instead of a paper knife to open envelopes for statements and delivery bills, but it was still a knife, so the blade on it could injure someone. Genji hid it in his sleeve with a well-practiced motion. Then he approached the back door himself, giving Gerda a silent nod. Gerda cautiously approached the back door and slowly started to open it. The shadow of a person suddenly shuffled into sight, landed on his knees and fell over. Yoda fell backwards onto his backside and couldn't get up. The human shadow was soaked in rain, smeared with mud and drenched with blood.
カノン、大丈夫か？南條先生。
It was Canon. His breath was feeble, and the puddles of mud he left were quickly drenched bright red. When Nanjo held him and turned him face up, there was a deep, gruesome wound right in the centre of his chest, as he'd been stabbed there by a spear or something. Even now, deep red blood poured out from there.
これはひどいですよ。どうしましょう。救急箱ですか？救急箱ですか？
カノンさん、傷口に手を当ててしっかり押さえてください。
Isn't Canon dead in red text? Wait, we said he was killed. Yeah, and yet he's dead.
使用人室のベッドに運びましょう。皆さん、手を貸してください。
Did Beatrice time?
さあ、カノンさん、
Did Beatrice time travel him into the future or something?
しばらく我慢してください。
しっかりして。もう大丈夫よ。だから傷口から手を離さないで。
とにかく使用人室へ運ぼう。熊沢ローザ様にカノンが見つかったことの報告を。
待って、ローザ様にはダメ。
待ってください。カノンさんがローザ様にはダメだと言っています。
どういう意味なの、カノン君。
今はいい。早く使用人室へ運ぼう。熊沢、ローザ様にはまだお伝えするな。カノンに事情を聞いてからにする。
はい。
He told them not to tell Rosa right after appearing in this state. This could only mean something very disquieting. What? An eerie anxiety rose to their faces.
さあ皆さん、急いで運びましょう。早く早く。
Can only go well. Canon's wound was unbelievably deep, and judging from Nanjo's pale face, it was a miracle that he was still conscious.
これはひどい。何か槍のようなもので刺されたようです。肺まで届いてなければなんとか持つかも。とにかく止血を。
No matter how much Nanjo tried to wipe off that gushing deep red blood, he couldn't do it. He couldn't wipe it all away. And each time the wound was aggravated, causing Canon to cry in anguish.
カノン君、カノン君、カノン君、しっかりして、しっかりして。
南條先生、替えのタオルです。なんてむごい。
容体はどうですか？
本音を言うと生きているのが信じられん深手だ。刺されどころが幸運だったのかもしれん。だが出血がひどすぎる。輸血が必要だが明日まで無理だ。
ローザ様が僕たちを。喋ら
ないで、カノン君。傷口が開いちゃ
う。ローザ様がやってきて。お嬢様と。
You all heard me say it. You all heard me say it.
何ですって？ローザ様がですか？おお、おお、そんなことって、そんなことって。
間違いないのか？
はい、間違いなくローザ様でした。
さあ、もう喋らないで。熊沢さん、もう一つの救急箱を取ってください。
源氏さん、ローザ様がなんてことはあり得るのでしょうか？
わからん。
Disregarding Nanjo and Kumasawa, who were struggling hard and stained with blood as they tried to stop the bleeding, Genji and Goda faced each other. Because if what Canon said was the truth, Rosa was the culprit who killed Jessica.
おのれ、ローザめ。よくもお嬢様を。
Because they're going so hard on this, it's very unlikely that Rosa's actually the killer. Canon hasn't specifically said she's the killer, just she did something, probably defile the corpse in some way.
殺してやる。
Because Rosa did show up in the room and act all weird. Canon screamed even more hatefully. His hate-filled voice made it seem like he was seeing Jessica being harmed right in front of his eyes.
確かにローザ様がお嬢様を殺す理由はあるかもしれない。後ろ宮家が全滅すれば遺産は全てローザ様のもの。だとしたらバトラ様やジョージ様も危険なのでは？ローザ様は銃を持っている上に今客間には彼らしかいない。源氏さん、これはかなりまずいことでは？
Sharon suddenly ran out into the corridor. Her expression was complex and tragic, as though she didn't know what to believe. Shannon ran to where? To the inside of the mansion had been scrumptiously cleaned, so it probably wouldn't be easy to find. She might find it if she searched the rose garden, but she probably wouldn't. They'd probably all be lost in the wind and rain. That's right, the boiler room isn't cleaned very often, so she went there, she might be able to find it. Shannon ran downstairs to find that in the underground boiler room. Did some medicine take effect at the brink of death, or was Canon finally beyond feeling pain? For the time being, at least Canon painful grasping had been subsided. Nanjo apparently didn't view it as a good sign, and he didn't let his eyes off Canon for a second. Kumasawa firmly gripped Canon's hand and kept encouraging him so that the willpower keeping him alive didn't fade away. Genji and Goda seemed uncertain how to respond to the truth Canon had risked his life to deliver.
ローザ様の銃は確か4発か5発の弾が込められたはずだ。
決して少ない数ではないですね。でもあの銃は弾の装填に結構な慣れが必要だったはず。一発目は撃たせてしまうかもしれませんが、みんなで襲いかかれば次を撃たせずに銃を奪い取れるかも。
この島には医者はいても薬はなく、病院もない。
Both the stupid idea of killing Battler and George with the gun and saying Beatrice attacked her is thwarted with the fact that George and Battler could probably easily overpower her, so she shoots one and gets beaten up by the other one.
撃たれどころが悪ければ死ぬぞ。
それは分かっていますが、それより早く行動を起こさないとまた次の事件が起こる可能性も。私たちはローザ様にうまく追い出された気がします。今頃ジョージ様やバトロ様が殺されている可能性も。
そんな危険な相手なら無理に刺激しない方がいいんじゃありませんか。
しかし明日までは長い。どんな手を打ってくるか想像もつきませんよ。源氏さん、こちらから仕掛けるべきです。せめて10歳理由をこじつけて奪えばなんとかなるかも。
弾は4、5発じゃありませんか。ということは私たち全員を殺すには足りないということです。迂闊に刺激しなければきっとローザ様もむやみには。
あいつは言ったよ。僕たちを皆殺しにすると言った。
Canon, who they thought was sleeping quietly, suddenly started talking brightly. Almost though he'd been awake this whole time and suddenly opened his mouth. Canon looked firm and steady, which relieved Nigel a bit, but considering the depth of that wound, he couldn't wipe away a certain creepy feeling. He knew because he was a doctor. After losing so much blood, Canon might have easily lost consciousness, and yet somehow he was intensely aware of his surroundings. Was it youth, or was it tenacity? Sometimes the power of human life surpassed common knowledge. While stopping the bleeding, Nanjo had groped around inside the bleeding hole with tweezers, making sure there was no foreign objects in the affected area. And the great depth of the wound had shocked him. It suddenly reached as far as his lungs. And yet, no, the fact that he's still alive is wonderful. The Canon had spoken clearly. He'd hatefully stated the one named Rosa made this wound, cursing and raging over and over and over.
あいつは親方様の財産を独り占めするために、台風が過ぎ去るまでにどんな手を使ってでも皆殺しにする気なんだ。
Is this not canon?
くそ、なんて人だ。源氏さん、どうしましょう。私たちにも何か武器がいるのでは。
にわかには信じられん。ローザ様がそのようなことを。
源氏様、信じる信じないじゃない。あいつが僕に、そうこの僕が聞いたんです。どうして信じてくれないんですか。
起きないで。傷に触ります。
Canon sat up from the bed speaking to Genji, who didn't seem to be willing to believe Canon's story.
あいつは僕たちを必ず全員殺す。もうきっと客間の方々も殺されているに違いありません。僕らが先に殺さなければ必ず僕らが先に殺される。僕が先に殺されたようにみんなも先に殺される。殺さなきゃ殺される。殺さなきゃ殺される。殺さなきゃ殺される。
Do I have to prove that the dead person walking isn't actually dead or using magic?
カノンさん、あんた本当に痛くないのか。
ああ、これですか。大した傷じゃありません。
大した傷じゃないどころか、あんたは
本当に大したことありません。
Did for a flesh wound.
こんなのもう全然痛くないし、本当に大した傷じゃない。
As Canon said that, he began to untie the bandages that had been painstakingly wrapped. The gruesome hole in his chest was immediately exposed.
カノンさん、そんなことをしてはダメですよ。早く横になって。
大丈夫ですって。ほら、ねえ、大した傷じゃないでしょ。
Canon showed off his gaping wound, which was still slowly spitting out foamy blood. Everyone averted their eyes reflexively.
ほら、全然大した傷じゃないですって。
やめなさい。傷をいじってはいけません。
ほら、見て。 全然深い傷じゃないんですよ。ほらほら。
Cannon held up 2 fingers and showed them to everyone, and slowly started to stick them into a gruesome wound right in the centre of his chest, plunging, slimy, squishy, wet. His fingers went in deep all the way to their bases.
カノンさん、やめてやめて。
Both fingers were sticking all the way into his chest up to their bases, and then he slowly pulled them out exactly in the same way. His fingers pulled out stained a sticky, solid, deep red colour, and there was even a thread hanging. The fingers were covered up to their bases in deep red. Zombies.
ね、全然大した傷じゃないでしょ。
Oh God, is this Beatrice? At the moment the door was slammed open and Shannon appeared. Even after she saw Cannon stained with fresh blood, her impregnable expression didn't
や
falter.
あ姉さん、どこへ行っていたの？僕が既得だというのに、一体どこへ？
Make up your mind.
ボイラー室に行ってきたの。探し物があって。それより確かめたいの。あなたは本当にカノン君。
It was only natural. Everyone believed he was Cannon. They couldn't understand the meaning of Shannon's question. When they looked, they noticed Shannon was holding a handkerchief in her hand. It was filthy and looked like it used to wipe away some trash or dust. While holding that, she brought Cannon, drawing closer to his feet.
なんだい、それは。
クモの巣を拭き取ったハンカチよ。
なんでそんなものを。
Cannon's deeply afraid of spiders, is he? Okay.
カノン君なら平気だろうけど、もしあなたにとってクモが天敵だったなら嫌うかなって思って。
Wait, no, Beatrice is afraid of spiders. What?
やだな。僕がどうして雲を嫌うの？
ごめん、試すね。
シャノンさん。
When Shannon brought the handkerchief close to Cannon's thigh, something happened in an instant. It happened all at once. The human eye couldn't have followed it. Cannon jumped like a wild goat, fleeing from the thing Shannon was holding. And from his arm, some kind of afterglow flashed purple and drew a curve through space. That arc, which drew 3 beautiful purple curves, traced across the throats of Nanjo and Kumasawa, who had been tending to him. And in an instant, Nanjo and Kumasawa's throats opened up like gaping mouths, and the blood really started spewing out. The third purple curve should have traced across Shannon's throat, but Shannon wasn't there, because Genji, who had been behind her, had wrapped his own arm around Shannon's neck and pulled her back. It all happened in an instant. It was instant. In the instant it took Goda to think fast and attempt to understand the scene, the frozen moment in time shattered. Blood was gushing from Nanjo and Kumasawa's torn open necks. Cannon jumped and kicked off a picture frame that had been hanging from the wall behind, springing forward like a cat aiming for Shannon's throat again. But Cannon's target once again disappeared from right in front of him, because Genji had pulled Shannon again and the two of them had fallen to the ground in defensive crouch.
いい反射神経だ。この老いぼれ家具が。
ゴダ。
Even Goda was no fool. Even if he couldn't fully understand what's going on, he at least realised that if Cannon wasn't seized, his own life would be in peril. He sprung at Cannon with his huge body, pushing him against the wall with all his weight and physical strength. Another purple curve was drawn from the tips of the fingers on Canon's right hand. When he raised that hand like a sword aiming for Goda's back, there was a loud thunk, because Canon's raised hand had been pinned to the wall. He couldn't tear his palm away from the wall. Sticking out from it was a knife Genji had thrown. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be surprising to see someone as old as Genji handle a knife so skillfully, but in this abnormal space, no one paid it much mind.
源氏様これを
Genji took a handkerchief with a spider web stuck to it from Shannon and approached Canon, who was pinned to the wall by Goda's massive body and the knife.
やめろそれは近づけるなやめろやめろ
When Genji pulled the handkerchief again, pushed the handkerchief against Canon's face, there was a sound just like setting meat on a red hot iron plate. Of course the smell was the same too, though he was horribly burnt, festering in the filthy red and black and crying out in his death throes. Canon's body burst open and scattered. It was almost as though a balloon filled with gold leaf had popped. The entire servants' room was completely buried in a storm of gold leaf, now a cloud of gold butterflies. Both butterflies began to softly fade as though into water, or rather into the empty air itself. And afterwards all was left was the three survivors sitting on with their butts stained with blood. However, not everyone was merely stained with blood. Some of them were lying on the ground spurting out blood themselves. Slits so sharp they looked like they'd cut your finger if you touched them opened wide, and large amounts of blood kept pouring out.
何だったんだ。いや、今のは。
ゴーダ、怪我はないか。
私は大丈夫です。しかし、私たちは何を見たんだ。何があったんです。私はあれを確かにこの手でこの壁に押し付けていたのに、その私が何があったのか理解できない。
Yoda looked at his own hand. The bright red blood left from his left scalpel of Canon definitely remained, and yet Canon was nowhere to be seen, because he had disappeared. He had transformed into gold butterflies and scattered. Goda slept screaming alone without a clue what was going on. Aha, we've got updates. Kumasawa dead, Canon still vanishing, Nanjo dead. We're almost at the end. As Genji watched over her, silent as always,